My name is Álvaro Sánchez, and I'm going to talk to you about single-page web applications, how to deal with them in Grails. So I'm sorry because Mr. Very Rich is having a siesta now, so you're not that lucky. But I'll do my best to deliver a good talk about it. Don't be confused by my accent. It isn't Spanish, so it's kind of English, and I do it in English just for respect of the people who cannot speak Spanish. So, but I think my English can be easily understood by everybody. Okay, so who am I? First of all, I'm a passionate software developer. I think that's the sentence who best defines me. But also many of you may know about me because I'm the founder and CEO, CTO, or intern of Salenda and Escuela de Groovy, which are the platinum sponsors of Greach. So Salenda and Escuela de Groovy are pretty much the same company. It's like, for example, VMware and Spring Source. Okay. And what we do, consulting, training, projects focus on Groovy and Grails, and well, we have been pushing the Grails community in Spain since 2007, and we're quite proud of doing that work. I myself, I'm using, luckily I'm very happy, Groovy and Grails since 2007. So in this talk, I'm going to talk about what a single-page application is, how to compare with typical Grails architectures, and I'll do some examples, just if they work. One of them is a basic example about AngularJS, and the other one is more extensive example using Backbone.js, MongoDB, Grails, and so on. Okay. Well, so well, first of all, how many of you are already aware about what a single-page application is? Please raise your hands. Okay, so quite half of the people. Any of you are using it already in production? No, just for fun, for attacking in an event like this? Okay. So basically, Grails is an MVC framework where, as you may already know, the model is implemented with Pogos, which is basically GORM or Hibernate. Views are done using GSPs, taglibs, and the whole set of stuff you have with Grails in the view. And controllers are simply Groovy classes with methods as actions. So, given that, what is a single-page application? Also known as single-page interface or single-page application. Well, but that's, apart from being a quite wide picture, It's probably the most famous single-page application you may be already using. There are some other examples, like for example, Twitter web application. And it's basically a web application where you can move around the web, move around the application without page refresh. Okay, so whenever you enter into the application, you always stay there, and you need some mechanism to communicate with the server, which is typically REST, using either XML or JSON. So when you do that, the MVC logic, the MVC code, is in the browser, in the client, and yes, written in JavaScript. Okay? In that case, the model are JavaScript classes. The views can be written in HTML. We'll see later that that can be done either on client side or on server side. I will discuss about each option. And you have, obviously, like in many other MVCs, you have controller services, which are also written in JavaScript. So, did you say JavaScript? Really? My mother? Yes, please don't get angry, but please do get nerd about everything. Fortunately, some people like JavaScript. And you have a pretty picture of them. I'm not calling you pigs if you like JavaScript, but more or less. So, well, given that definition of what a single-page application is, why should I care about it? But because they have some advantages. First of all, they're faster. Because when you have the MVC logic in the browser, you can leverage, you can use all the power of modern JavaScript engines, like for example V8 of Chrome or WebKit or whatever. Also, when you have a single page application, you are only interchanging with the server the relevant data, not full markup, images, static content, which is not relevant and may cost you more bandwidth that only sending the data. Because of that, probably the user is going to have a better user experience because the response is faster, is more responsive. Okay? Everything happens almost immediately. Okay? Data refreshes can be done instantly. And it depends on your skills and your background and your choices, it will be easier for the developer. So if you choose the right framework, you don't have to deal with, for example, jQuery events, callbacks, and what to do with when you have a response from the server. So that kind of things with typical MVC frameworks, JavaScript frameworks, are done automatically. Obviously, it also has some disadvantages. For example, what happens if the browser doesn't have JavaScript enabled? Because obviously you have a problem, right? You should gracefully degrade to allow the user to use your application. Do you know what graceful degradation is? Yes, no? Please move your eyes if you're still. Thank you. Also, you have to be very careful about server communication failures. Like, for example, when the three musketeers switch down the Wi-Fi, okay? You need to be still to work to the application, even if some communication get lost. That's pretty much this in question. And probably the worst one is that you have to write a lot of JavaScript code. Yes, I'm sorry. And probably you may be forced or forced to replicate the same MVC code that you have in the server in the client. I mean, for example, if you're using an MVC framework with, for example, Grails, you could end using or coding a model both in GURM and in JavaScript. Okay? Okay, so how can I use or implement single-page applications using Grails? If you're thinking of doing that, what probably comes first in mind is that you're going to have less server logic. Your application gets simplified. So in that case, you can use, for example, GURM, GURM for Hibernate or GURM for NoSQL, with a REST API on top of it, just to deal with the communication between the client and the server. And for luck, implementing a REST API with Grails is quite easy. Really, really easy. We'll see an example of that later. So you can focus only on server-side logic. For example, transactions, data retrieving, storing, scalability, security, authentication, and so on. So, do you really need a Grails application for that? What do you think? Who think that Grails is not needed to do that? Please raise your hands. Only 2 people, 3 people? Well, it's a Grails conference, so what I would expect with this question? Well, it depends. Not really. Yeah, I mean, everybody of us likes Grails. Myself, I'm obsessed about Grails. And I love to use Grails everywhere, but you should be careful because there may be some situations where Grails is not the best option. For example, you can use Vertex. For those of you who don't know what Vertex is, I would define Vertex like a Node.js-like framework with better performance and less hype. Yes, it's true. So Vertex is basically having Groovy on the server side with a lightweight communication protocol and plugins or verticals to the packaging, communication with the database, and probably everything you need to do on the server side. okay? But you know that vertex isn't cool enough, so you could also do it in Node.js. One thing to keep in mind is that with single-page applications, the technology used on the server side doesn't matter at all, okay? And that remembers me about, for example, what was said about web services, you remember? So it's something like the same. But well, you could do it in plain Java if you want. Or probably the best option in the future will be using Grails 3.0. This is a very new slide from the Graham talk from this morning. So in Grails 3.0, you will have application profiles. That means that you can have the typical classic servlet profile with all the servlet API, GSPs, and so on. But probably we'll have a couple of profiles more, one lightweight, who has been defined by Graham like a vertex-like profile. Probably only Groovy with some additions, and one specific for REST. So imagine, for example, having a Grails application on the server side with GORM, validation, and all the pretty good stuff you already know about Grails, but without the bloat of servlet API that you don't want to deal with. So, given the options we have on the server side, what can I do with the client? Fortunately, there's a lot of frameworks. Well, fortunately or not, there's a lot of frameworks. You have AngularJS, Knockout, Ember, Backbone, and there's even one who's called Batman. Nice. Nice name. That's what happens when programmers give names to things. So you have a comprehensive comparison of all of them with a nice GitHub project called MVC by Adi Osmani. That guy, it's doing really good things with JavaScript and so on. They have the repository, and what those guys have done basically is to implement a typical to-do application with 10 or 20 JavaScript frameworks. So you have the comparison of all of them. And you will realize, if you look at the source code, that almost all of them have similar concepts. Yeah, similar features. I'm going to compare each one on the JavaScript side with the one we already have in Grails on the server side. So on an MVC framework, you have models. Models are typically implemented extending a JavaScript class from the framework you're using, and it will be the equivalent to a domain class. So you also have views and templates. Yes, views in JavaScript and templates in JavaScript. That can sound weird in the mind of a typical server-side developer, but basically views are written in HTML, but depending on the framework you're going to use, Some of them, for example, are written in JavaScript or JSON. And templates are reusable pieces of code, of view code, that use this special notation, which will be similar to the expression language-like notation that we have in Grails. And almost all of them uses either mustache or handlebars, okay? But all of them work very similar. When you have expressions like this, the JavaScript runtime of the MVC framework you have is going to replace those expressions with their value, right? The most important thing is that whenever your data changes, those values are automatically replaced. You have to deal with, okay, I have new data from the server side, and I have a callback, and when that callback is called, I need to update that piece of the view. No, it's done automatically. You also have controllers, which plays the same role as in Grails. And they have the concept of routing. Because have you wondered about what will happen with SAO, with single-page applications? Do you know what SAO is? I mean, in terms of optimizations for Google, for example. Or, for example, what will happen with history or with the browser back button. Just look at the typical single-page application I've mentioned before, and you will see a hash in the URL. Okay, so that's the way they're managing the browser history. Okay, so each framework has a routing capability in terms of it's able to change that part of the hash, okay, whenever you need to go to another view, okay, but that happens within the same page. There's no page refresh. And that routing capabilities would be the equivalent to URL mappings. Obviously, all of these have some gotchas that there's probably more than the one I have listed here, but for example, are views generated on the client side really the best option? For example, how would I do internationalization? It's difficult to do in the client, okay? It's easier, it's better to do on the server side. And for example, in Grails, that's really easy, okay? So probably sometimes makes sense to generate the views on the server side. And also, for example, leading with security or authorization issues. Okay? How could you control whether a user is able to view some part of the application or not? That kind of logic is better implemented in the server side. Or for example, with caching, with view caching, you have plenty of options on the server side to cache your content, your views. Obviously, you also have some caching features on MVC frameworks. For example, Backbone
has a dependency with _JS. _JS is a very small JavaScript library for basic object manipulation, and one of the features it has is the ability to cache client-side templates. But obviously, that caching is done in the client. So there will no be benefit with several users. I mean, the caching wouldn't be done for all the users. And also, as we move from programming in Groovy, for example, on the server side, to do it in JavaScript on the client side, you're probably needing some kind of dependency management. The same we have on the server side with, for example, Maven. That kind of solution, fortunately, is already available on JavaScript. For example, using require.js. Require.js is a dependency management framework for JavaScript, which dynamically loads the required libraries on demand. Well, not on demand, but depending on your configuration, the configuration you specify. And many other gotchas that you were probably going to face just for the sake of using JavaScript. Any questions so far? No, it's everything clear? So, do you hear me? Well, how's with the size of the font? Is it great?
Can you increase it?
Yes. No. I don't need that. What I have here is a plain HTML. I'm going to show you some basic feature of AngularJS, right? How to choose one framework or another? Well, it depends on many factors, like in many parts of software development. One of the good things about AngularJS is that it's backed by Google, so probably it's going to have a better feature. Okay, so I have here just the CSS of Twitter Bootstrap and the JS of Angular and underscore, which is also a dependency of Angular. Okay? Well, I'm going to include use it a different name. A JavaScript file where I'm going to include all my AngularJS code. The way Angular works is using directive. For example, you have that kind of directive, which is ignored by the browsers, but is read are considered by Angular to manipulate your document object model. Okay. So with this directive, I'm specifying which is the scope of the part of the view that is going to be managed by Angular. I have only reduced to, for example, a small div, or for example, just the full HTML document. I'm going to open this on Firefox. I don't know if I have enough resolution to do that, but I'll try. Just to let you know that IntelliJ IDEA has a lot of good things to develop. Obviously, not only in Rails, but in HTML and JavaScript. For example, a quick reload, and you'll see how can you code in the HTML file and reload within IDEA the browser. So we are using the first directive, which is ngController. And we're using that to show you some basic features of Angular. I don't know by heart, so I need to have it written. So controllers in Angular are basically JavaScript functions. And you have a scope. The scope here is like the model in MVC. You know, the data structure where you can pass variables to the view. This like the same. For example, I can store a variable in the scope. And I can reference within the controller in the view using an AngularJS directive. And that's it, basically, total to-dos. Well, obviously, it's not working. Don't worry, because I have the solution, so I have a lifesaver for that. And given what time is it, I'm going to use it. Yeah, basically I have the application done. But I'll explain. Don't worry, I'll explain. So that's the final code. Okay. Just focus on this piece of view code. I'm going to maximize it. Next, for example, we are using an AngularJS directive to access a method within the scope, and that is implemented just like JavaScript functions. That's all. For example, I can use the name of a variable which is in the scope, okay, and it is replaced, right? So you can access to variables, methods, or functions, whatever. You can also have Angular directives to do the kind of looping you're used to do with ESPs. But keep in mind that everything is done on the client side, right? So for example, what I'm doing here is for each to-do in to-dos variable which is in the scope, just iterate, just loop over the collection, and for example, this is similar to do expression language like in Grails. There's nothing more to note in this piece of code. You have a lot of Angular directives, for example, which ng model. You're telling the framework which model class are mapped to that, in this case, is an HTML input. So whenever it changes its state, it modifies the model automatically. What we have in the controller, we have a variable which is a list of maps, a function which returns the total size of the collection, a function which returns only the elements of the collection who has not done in their property, and a function that adds a new element to the collection. Nothing more, no callbacks, no events, and what happens when you use it? Some things, I don't know if you have noted that that number has refreshed automatically. It's only bound to that property, but there hasn't been any event to refresh that value. You see it? Also, whenever the collection to-dos has a new element, Angular takes care about updating that piece of code. Okay, do you understand? Yeah? Great. I have some minutes left to do the last demo. The last one is full Grails application with some backbone inside. So what I have in the Grails side, well, a very complicated domain class, okay? This is what I'm going to store in MongoDB, and for those of you who don't know how the MongoDB plugin works, it's just about uninstalling the Hibernate plugin and installing the MongoDB plugin, and obviously having a MongoDB on your machine running. You could use, for example, a MongoDB instance of MongoHQ or whatever. We also has the URL mapping using the resource notation. Do you know how that works? No? I think it's a new feature of Grails 2, and it maps HTTP methods to action names, right? So for example, the HTTP get method maps to show action, the put method maps to update action, and so on. And that's what I have in the controller. Okay, very complicated controller with simple create, read, update, and delete interface using JSON render. More on the Grails side, well, just a GSP. In this case, I'm using Backbone, and I'm using resources framework to do the dependency management of the static resources. And well, the way Backbone works is slightly different from Angular. Here we have more JavaScript code, unfortunately. Let me show how the application works. I'm going to demonstrate it showing the Fireball console. So the first thing we should see, if I refresh the page, is that, I don't know if you see, an HTTP GET is done to the default controller that holds the collection. This moment there's no items inside, so it's empty. Where it is that specified. That's the great part of Backbone. That's quite JavaScript code, but in one part, here we have just specifying URL and a prefix of the URL. Backbone is automatically mapping REST calls to that resource, that REST resource, right? So when it first loads, it tries to get the collection. I'm going to show you more Backbone code. For example, that's a Backbone model, which is a class standing basic Backbone class with defaults, attributes, properties, methods, and so on. So that's one of the gotchas. I have had to define an entity in Grails and a model in Backbone. There are some scaffolding plugins for MVC frameworks in Grails which do care about these situations, and you're probably lucky if you use them. This is the controller. When you specify which model is tied to, the URL, and some kind of methods and filters. And these are views in Backbone, which are written, in this case, in JavaScript with, by the way, that underscore is _JS. It's what you give variable to use methods on. Well, I wish I would have more time to explain that, but, well. In this case, the controller has mapped to create a new element on enter K, and also because it has a remote storage, you could also use local storage, HTML5 local storage, but in this case, it's also try to save the element on the server side, and this element is on the server side stored on a MongoDB database. I can, for example, add another one. I can edit and double click, okay? Mark as complete, and you see how the rest calls are done in the console. Just delete also, which is the last method, and I hope you let me to mark this as complete. Okay. So that's all. Any more question?
What's the browser compatibility of these tools, Backbone or Angular?
You're probably going to need a modern browser.
Okay.
But they have bindings to use, for example, with jQuery, so you can leverage jQuery browser compatibility in some situations.
And you mentioned SEO as well. Do you have any experience of how Google or other search engine is
crawling?
Yeah.
Not myself, but some people have talked about problems, issues when Google not crawling single-page interfaces. But I think, for example, Angular works with SEO. So probably if it's not working, it's because you're doing something wrong, probably. I have some T-shirts for people who ask me a question, so you have one. 2 questions, yeah. One more question?
I don't want a T-shirt, but how do you gracefully degrade this application?
I think there's no time enough for questions. Thank you, everybody.
Just you have to code the role MVC, server side, DSPs, and
Yeah,
what alternatives you have?
I'm going to pick the microphone. It depends on, for example, how do you implement the views, right? So keep in mind that as much JavaScript code you have on client side, you're going to have more trouble with server-side communication. In the situations when you want to gracefully degrade, you'll need to fall back to a typical page refresh and post and redirect Grails way and rendering views on the server side and so on.
So you have to code a whole
Probably.
application.
Probably. Yeah, because keep in mind that you're not going to refresh the page at all. So almost, but not almost, but all your user interaction is done using Ajax call. If you cannot do Ajax call, you will need to do normal HTTP operations.
And also, I have another question. Can you integrate this with the new EmberJS plugin?
Probably yes. Sure. It will work. Yeah.
So you can subscribe some topic and receive the events.
Just keep in mind that the EmberJS is just a wrapper around atmosphere to make you easy to not to deal with client sockets and browser pass, server pass and so on. So it makes you easier to do that. Okay. Any more question? I've run out of time, I think, that you have. No? So thank you for attending, for listening to me, and see you later on the bar.